we've reached the halfway point of the college football playoff rankings. From week 2 to week 3 of the rankings, there weren't many surprises, no new drama, and the top 7 teams all remained unchanged. Cincinnati, undefeated with a win on the road at number 8 Notre Dame, is still not enough for the committee, coming in as the first team out at number 5. And joining me here today is college football insider for The Athletic, Chris Vannini. Chris, first off, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you here back in the American studios. Each week you rank every single FBS team 1 through 130. I can only imagine what that process is like for you. You have Cincinnati there at number 2. You've had the Bearcats there steady all season. What boxes do the Bearcats check to rank them second?
Well, first off, they have one of the best wins of the season. Notre Dame is now a top 10 team, clearly, and other than Georgia winning at Alabama, no other team has a better win, and Cincinnati hasn't lost. And you can make a case for a lot of those teams, 2 to 7. The committee has, there's plenty of debate to go around, but I think just that win coupled with not having a loss, that's why I still have Cincinnati there. Alabama has played really well, and you could put Alabama 2 as the committee did, and I wouldn't argue it, but I still think Cincinnati has a lot to stand on. The fact that they have played kind of up and down the last few weeks and are still at number 5, I think is a sign of respect for the committee to Cincinnati, even if they're not, in that top 4 yet.
The Bearcats back-to-back weeks there at that number 5 spot. They have to be almost as concerned as what's behind them, also in terms of what's in front of them. They're not essentially controlling their own destiny, and you wrote about this with Oklahoma State in particular. What are the odds that Oklahoma State really could play spoiler and jump the Bearcats in this thing?
Yeah, it's certainly possible. Obviously, Cincinnati got a boost from Oklahoma losing to Baylor last weekend, but Oklahoma State's been kind of sitting out there, not a lot of people paying attention to them. They have Oklahoma in a couple weeks, Bedlam. They may have a rematch in the championship game, the Big 12 championship game. They may play Baylor again in the Big 12 championship game. So Oklahoma State is going to have 2 opportunities for marquee wins to add to their resume, and their only loss was I think a 2-point loss or something, 3 points to Iowa State on a maybe questionable 4th down measurement. So Oklahoma State is kind of lurking behind everybody, but they're a team that I think people have to pay attention to, and Cincinnati is one of those teams.
You're a Michigan State grad, so naturally, the journalism bias aside, you've got to feel a little bit heated about what the committee has done with head-to-head. We've seen this inconsistency, putting Oregon ahead of Ohio State, valuing the head-to-head there, but not necessarily the same with Michigan and Michigan State. How does the committee justify their ranking in terms of that head-to-head matchup?
Look, it makes no sense. It goes against everything the committee has valued in head-to-head in these rankings. Oregon, Ohio State is one. Baylor, BYU was one. Wisconsin, Iowa is one. But for some reason, it's this game. And Gary Barta, the CFP chair, said yesterday, other than watching the games, if you look at them statistically, Michigan's the better team, which I think is one of the strangest things they've ever said from the committee. Honestly, I thought the rankings were solid. I had no real qualms with any of the rankings except for the Michigan State because of that head-to-head. It's strange. It does open up possibilities down the road if they both lose to Ohio State, who could go to a better bowl game. So it's one weird thing, and an otherwise, I think, pretty solid ranking from the committee.
Why do we play these games if they're going to, not value that head-to-head matchup? But with Cincinnati, their matchup this weekend, they have SMU, a team that lost in back-to-back weeks but came out and responded in a huge way, a 27-point win against UCF. What is the likelihood that the Mustangs could really end this run here this weekend for the Bearcats?
Yeah, there's a real chance. SMU, they're 8-2. The offense is very explosive. You look at last year's Cincinnati SMU game. It was a Cincinnati blowout, but SMU struggled mightily to get in the red zone. They had a lot of chances for touchdowns, couldn't get it done. I've been spending some time with the SMU team this week. They feel confident that if they play, the way they did against UCF, that they have a real chance in this game. And Cincinnati's got a few tough games coming up. This will be senior day for them. It'll be a lot of emotion, certainly for a lot of those players. And Nippert Stadium is going to be rocking for sure. And this is probably one of the better games of the weekend. I think people need to pay attention to.
What's the number one thing that Tanner Mordecai and this SMU offense is really going to have to do in order to, find ways to get around this Bearcat defense that has been so tough all season?
They're going to have to find some explosive plays, especially in the passing game, and that's something Cincinnati doesn't really give up. Danny Gray has been hurt, the wide receiver, so Reggie Robertson's going to need to step up. The running game is going to need to do more, but those Cincinnati defensive backs, maybe the best defensive backfield in the country. And so this will be by far the toughest test for Tanner Mordecai and SMU, but they're going to need to get some big plays, I think, because going so slowly down the field against the Cincinnati defense, they force you into mistakes.
After SMU, Cincinnati will go on the road to face a talented East Carolina team on Black Friday. And then, should they win one of those last two games, they'll face Houston in the American Championship. Of these three teams left on the Bearcats schedule, who's most likely to play spoiler?
Probably Houston, because Houston's the best team, but don't overlook ECU. I mean, the last time Cincinnati went to East Carolina 2 years ago, East Carolina had 600 yards and Cincinnati needed a field goal in the final seconds for, I think, a 46-43 win. So ECU's been playing well. They just beat Memphis in overtime. They're 6-4, bowl eligible for the first time in a while. That'll be their senior day, and they're a very good team on senior day. So don't overlook East Carolina. But I think Houston's just a better team, and so that'll be probably the biggest test for Cincinnati left on the schedule.
We saw head coach Mike Houston so emotional after that win, really excited for his team. So, yeah, there's going to be a whole lot of emotions there in that one. For Houston, though, they finally ranked by the committee, finally earning that respect. They came in at number 24 last night. With that being said, how much can that really make a difference down the stretch for Cincinnati when they play a ranked team? Strength of schedule has been one of the things the Bearcats has been knocked on by the committee. Every week we hear that from the committee chair, Gary Barta. Why can this Houston victory over a ranked opponent really make a big difference?
Yeah, I mean, SMU's 8-2. East Carolina will have a winning record. Houston is a top 25 team. These are games that will improve Cincinnati's schedule finally. And, if you have another win over a ranked team, that helps. Now, of course, if Cincinnati wins and Houston falls out of the ranking, does it count as a win against the top 25 team? Look at it however you want. But that strength of schedule metric that has been hurting Cincinnati, it will get better. It's not going to be a great number in the end. But to close with wins over quality teams like that, I think is the opportunity Cincinnati has need to make that kind of statement that they haven't really been able to do the last couple of weeks.
With everything going on in the college sports world right now, one of the big topics, of course, is playoff expansion. It seems inevitable at this point, and there's a few different models floating around. Which one do you think at this point is most likely going to stick?
Yeah, back in the summer when they revealed the 12-team model with the top 6 conference champions, there was a lot of fanfare. Nobody really had a problem with it, and it seemed like we were on the fast track to making this happen. And then Texas and Oklahoma decide to leave for the SEC, and everything blows up, and nobody trusts anybody, and it's a complete mess. So here we are several months later. They meet on December 1st to try to come up with an agreement of some kind. There is the top 6 conference champions model that they first put out there out of a 12-team field. And there's also a 12-team field where the 5 Power 5 teams will get a bid, and the one top group of 5 team will get a bid. That seems to be an attempted compromise with some of the conferences like the ACC that are more interested in maybe an 8-team model. So, the ACC wants access, the Pac-12 wants access, the group of 5 obviously wants access. So it's most likely we're going to get to 12. Perhaps this 5+1 is the way to get everybody on board, but it's really been a more unexpectedly difficult path to get here, all because of conference realignment and everything that's happened since. There's not a lot of trust going on among the people in that room, and that spreads to a lot of things.
For the sport of college football, which model do you think is best in the long term?
I mean, I like 12, and I was originally an 8 person, but I like 12 because by giving the 4 byes to the next round, it gives conference champions something to play for. If Alabama and Georgia are meeting in the SEC championship game and they know they're both in, well, the winner of that game could automatically move to the next round. That makes it a lot more important. I like 12 because it keeps a lot more teams involved. I mean, you get into November and you could have, a third of college football still playing for a conference championship, playing for a spot in the playoff. So I like 12. I also like the top 6 conference champions because that seems like the most fair way to do it. Obviously, the group of 5 would much prefer that. The off chance you could get 2 group of 5 teams in. In the end, I don't think it's going to make a ton of difference if it's a 5+1 or top 6, just considering where the Pac-12 champion typically is, where the ACC champion typically is. But I think everybody agrees that we need to make this happen. And Bill Hancock has said that. Everybody wants to expand. It's just figuring out the right way to do it. And, they got to get this done probably by the end of this year if they want to implement it a couple years from now.
Still plenty to debate with the playoff expansion, and there will still be plenty to debate over the next few weeks with the college football playoff rankings. When all of this is said and done on December 5th, who do you think is going to be in that top 4?
This is tough because this has been one of the kind of the wackiest seasons we've seen in a while with so many top 25 upsets and stuff like that. I'm going with Georgia. They look like the best team in the country. Going with Oregon and Ohio State. I think they win out. And then I picked Cincinnati at the beginning of the year. I'll pick Cincinnati again. I might as well stick with it. I think Michigan State probably lose to Ohio State. I think Oklahoma State kind of knock each other out potentially with the Big 12. And that opens the door for Cincinnati, as well as Georgia beating Alabama in the SEC championship game, because the SEC could get 2 if Alabama wins. So I'm going to go with those 4. I think it'd be a little bit different than what we've seen in recent years. If the group of 5 can get in there for the first time, it would, I think, be a big change for a lot of people. So I'm going to go with those 4.
It certainly feels different this time around than in 2017 when we saw UCF undefeated fighting for their spot. So we certainly hope your prediction is right when all this is said and done. Chris, we appreciate you joining us. You do great work for The Athletic, and thanks again for coming on today.
Yep, thanks for having me.